Evening everybody, welcome one, welcome all. We should be live, we've got a good connection according to the streaming software at least. Thanks a lot for joining us on the My Left Eye live stream tonight. 2 streams in 2 nights. Yes, indeed. For those of you who joined us on our 1K subscriber special last night, it's great to see you again. We're over the moon to have passed that landmark, so thanks a lot for your continued support as well. We're going to dip straight into Keith's Fondue Lounge, as usual, while we wait for everybody to arrive. Feel free to post in the chat. If you're not a subscriber already, please do hit the subscribe button. Then 60 seconds later, you'll be able to join us, add your comments and questions in the chat. Let's go and join Keith and the gang. Okay, so you're tuned in to the My Left Eye live stream. A very warm welcome again to everybody here tonight. Whether you're watching this live or on a replay, it's great to have you here this evening. Please do hit the thumbs up button, really helps us out on the algorithm. Share this across your social media. It's been brilliant to see the channel growing lately, and once again just want to add my thanks to all of you amazing people for showing your support. Having just passed 1K subscribers, in fact we're coming pretty close to 2K subscribers now, which I've been delighted and overwhelmed with. Got a few new features on the channel as well for those of you who have only just started following us recently. If you'd like to become a member, we've got a couple of great packages starting from just 99p a month, and if you're a fan of live streams, you can enjoy exclusive streams as well as use our static emojis for just 99p a month. Also, if you'd like to go for one of our other packages, you can get exclusive videos and first looks at all of our content, as well as lots more, so please do check those out. That's a great way to help support the channel. We've also got super chats open and super stickers, super thanks. If you'd like your question or comment to get to the top of the queue, then please do use those. That's another great way to support the channel as well. I promise to read out all super chats as they come in, all contributions greatly appreciated. And of course, if you'd like to make a one-off contribution, you can also go to our Buy Me a Coffee page. You can check that out in the description for the stream or the channel description. So they're the ways that you can help to support the channel as we just spend a few more minutes in Keith's Lounge, as always, before we get into PMQs and the budget reaction from today's session in the House of Commons. We've also had George Galloway on the campaign trail this week in Lewisham. We're going to be taking a look at that as well. 1 or 2 comedy interludes as well. Thanks a lot for being here. So we're going to go through PMQs. We'll just quickly go over the budget after that as well. I will spare you the full hour of Jeremy Hunt giving his budget. Don't want to put any of our viewers into a coma. Of course, how would you be able to hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up and notification buttons if you're in a coma or join a membership? I wouldn't hear of it. So we'll briefly touch on that, and then we'll go into George Galloway's campaign. As I said, we have put out a video that's currently set to members only for that, if you'd like to take an exclusive look. It's one of the other perks of becoming a member of the channel as well. There's a by-election in Lewisham, a mayoral by-election tomorrow. Workers' Party of Britain have got a candidate. Galloway, as always, has drawn quite a crowd down there while he's been campaigning, so we're going to check that out, as well as other political analysis as well. And whether you've got a comment on any of those subjects or you just want to say hello, you're very welcome to join us in the chat tonight as well. Just a quick reminder, you'll have to hit the subscribe button for that one. 60 seconds is all it takes, and then you'll be able to comment and post in the chat with everyone else. So we're just warming up for another minute or so. and then we'll get straight into things. Let us know how you're doing tonight, where you're joining us from. Been great to see an international audience on the channel recently as well. A lot of comments and posts on some of our videos have been from people all over the world. It's brilliant to reach you wherever you're from this evening. You're very welcome here on the My Left Eye live stream. Of course, Keith's isn't the only party in town, as viewers of yesterday's 1K subscriber special live stream will be aware. Rachel Reeves has also got some sort of party going on nearby. We'll have a quick look at a development in that as well. So as always, Keith's got Margaret Hodge, Peter Mandelson, Lisa Nandy at the back there. Feel sorry for this poor dog. Someone call the RSPCA. And those two guests there are probably just going to drink the drinks as quick as they can, make a sharp exit. Maybe they're heading to Rachel Reeves' party. Who knows? So we're going to check that out in just a moment as the band finishes the intro. These were the scenes we saw yesterday from Rachel Reeves' other attempt at a party. Just want to put out really a public appeal to get John Hurt out of there. Maybe we should start a crowdfunder or something like that. But whatever it takes to get poor John out of there, he really does look uncomfortable. However, Rachel Reeves looks completely irrelevant there in that dire scene. She did have a visitor though, and we can confirm that now. Just recently, it wasn't just John Hurt there with her. You can see as well, she had a visit from Nurse Ratchet from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I'm sure she'll enjoy her company, no doubt. Someone's been splicing Thatcherite DNA up and splicing it with Ratchet maybe. That's how we've ended up with Rachel Reeves, but that's just a quick update on that situation as well. Thanks a lot for joining us tonight, everyone. So we're going to nip over to PMQs. We'll just go through that, starting from the top, and we'll see what Sunak has to say for himself. Pretty sure, as usual, I've seen one or two clips already. I've not seen it the full way through, as we're going to do now on the live stream. But I'm sure, as usual, he'll be dodging questions. It'll be probably an equally poor performance from Starmer. But will George Galloway be called to speak? Obviously, this is his first session since he was elected Member of Parliament for Rochdale last Thursday. Not 1 week ago, but he's already been hitting the headlines and being in the spotlight as well. Perhaps we might also see another decent confrontation from Stephen Flynn from the Scottish National Party, as we often do, so we'll dive straight in. Take it away, Lindsay, you useless... I don't know. It's hard to use the right adjectives sometimes. It's about as useful as a chocolate fire guard, but let's get cracking anyway.
We now start with questions, Prime Minister. Jason McCartney.
Question 1, please, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Jason McCartney.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker. According to the Alzheimer's Society, nearly 5,000 people are currently living with dementia in my Colne Valley constituency, of whom 3,153 have had a formal diagnosis. That figure went up by 1 this week with my dad's diagnosis. My dad is my constituent. Will my right honourable friend pledge to make dementia a priority by driving up diagnosis rates, bolstering dementia research, investing in social care and improving access to the most innovative diagnostic methods and improving access to new life-changing treatments.
Prime Minister.
Well, can I send my warmest wishes to my honourable friend and his father and family, and I recognise that a dementia diagnosis can bring worry, both for the person who is diagnosed, but also their wider family. And my honourable friend is absolutely right about the timely diagnosis of dementia. It's vital to make sure that those affected can access the care and support they need. NHS England is actually carrying out a pilot to make sure that we can improve dementia diagnosis in care homes. Our major condition strategy also includes a focus on dementia, but crucially, as my honourable friend said, we are now doubling the funding for dementia research so we can help everyone, including his father.
We now come to...
Of course, the usual planted question opening there. You have to remember how much the Tories have stripped services away over the last 15 years, including in the NHS. If this is a genuine pledge to help people with dementia, obviously that's a good thing. Dementia's a terrible disease. I've had friends and family who have suffered from dementia, and there does need to be more funding in it. But he mentioned care homes there as well, and you remember during the pandemic as well, the elderly were left for dead by the Conservative government, and care homes were an epicentre for the pandemic, for COVID-19. So the Tories' track record on looking after people in care homes as well as general health care obviously isn't great.
The Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Can I send my best wishes to the honourable member and his father also, and all those suffering in this way? Mr. Speaker, I can't let today pass without saying how saddened I was by the tragic death of Bronson Battersby, aged just 2, who died in heartbreaking circumstances in Skegness. I know that this House will join me in sending our deepest sympathies to his family. Mr. Speaker, the government has been forced to admit that it has lost contact with 85% of the 5,000 people earmarked for removal to Rwanda. Has he found them yet?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the honourable gentleman is that in spite of him blocking every single attempt that we have taken, we have managed now, because of our actions, to reduce the number of people coming here by over a third last year. Well,
immediately it gets into migration, which is obviously going to be one of the main so-called fighting points that Sunak's going to be putting up towards the general election later this year, of course. So we're going to be hearing a lot more about migration and the Stop the Boats policy, which is, of course, ridiculous.
Move over 20,000 people from this country back to their home countries, carried out 70% more illegal enforcement raids, arrested hundreds of people, closed down thousands of bank accounts, and processed over 100,000 cases, the biggest number in over 20 years, Mr. Speaker. That's because on this side of the House, we want to stop the boats, we have a plan, it's working, and with him, we would just go back to square one.
Well, he didn't take too long to get in there with a Stop the Boats, did he? And let's see if Keith's comedy response has any impact here. Keith's comedy hour.
My first thought is, how do you actually lose 4,250 people? Then you remember that this is the government that scrapped HS2, but the costs are still rising by billions. This is the government that spent £400 million of taxpayers' money on a Rwanda scheme, yet can't deport a single person. And this is the government that waged a week-long war on the Greek Prime Minister for reasons known only to themselves. And suddenly you're reminded that, of course, this farce of a government could lose the people it was planning to remove. But he didn't answer the question, so I'll ask him again. Where are the 4,250 people that the government has lost? Where are they?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, we've actually identified and removed over 20,000 people from this country back to where they belong. But he asks these questions about the Rwanda scheme, Mr. Speaker. Now, it is important that we get this up and running, because it's important, as the National Crime Agency say, that we have a working deterrence to resolve this issue. That's indeed how Australia solved this problem, and Albania has worked for us. But we know he asked these questions, Mr. Speaker, about the detail of these things, but we all know he doesn't.
Well, it's not so much a minor detail if there are 4,500 people unaccounted for. So I'm assuming they've come in, they've been registered, and now the government have got no idea where they are.
He doesn't actually care about solving this problem, and we know this because when the BBC asked him about the Rwanda plan, they quizzed him. They said, if the numbers crossing the channel on small boats decline, i.e., so it's working, would you still reverse it? The Labour leader said yes. It's crystal clear he doesn't have a plan, and it will be back to square one,
Mr. Speaker, spending £400 million on a plan not to get anybody to Rwanda whilst losing 4,000 people is not a plan. It's a farce. Only this government could waste hundreds of millions of pounds on a removals policy that doesn't remove anyone. Only this government could claim that it's going to get flights off the ground, only to discover they couldn't find a plane. Only this government could sign a removal deal with Rwanda, only to end up taking people from Rwanda to here. But he still hasn't answered the question. So I'll try again. What progress has he made in locating the 4,250 people his government has apparently lost? He's dodged it 3 times. Where are they?
What's been very pertinent here is Keith, and this was his opening question. So you've got to ask yourself, is he trying to put out the same sort of image as the Tories are, i.e. anti-immigration and xenophobia? Obviously, he's not going to get a straight answer from Sunak on this. He's asked him once, he's asked him twice. It's not going to be third time lucky. We know what the Tories are like. He will probably just quickly try and turn the question around and turn it into a party political broadcast, as usual.
Mr. Speaker, it's the same thing again and again. Here we are talking about what we are doing, but I'm happy to go over it, Mr. Speaker. What are we doing? We've increased the number of illegal enforcement raids by 70%, leading to thousands of arrests, using powers, Mr. Speaker, that he blocked in this House. We have closed down thousands of bank accounts of illegal workers, again, using powers that he blocked, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Mr. Do you want that early cup of tea, or are you going to be a little bit more silent, Prime Minister?
Oh, he actually has decided to stand up this week. We did a live stream last week, and I've mentioned since as well how quiet Lindsay Hoyle was. He didn't intervene, even to get people to keep the voices down, obviously trying to stay out of the spotlight after that debacle the other week over the ceasefire motion. But he's out straight away with his early cup of tea. Remarks he'll be cracking jokes with the Tories pretty soon, probably.
And, Mr. Speaker, as I said, we have worked through a record number of cases and returned a record number of people back to where they've come. All of that is a plan that is working, and we can see that it's working because the numbers of people coming to this country are down by over a third, Mr. Speaker. But again, it is a bit rich to hear him in here pretending that he cares about how we actually stop the boats when he's been crystal clear. He's been crystal clear and said that even if the plan is working to reduce the numbers, he would still scrap it, Mr. Speaker. It's because he has no values, no conviction and no plan, and is back to square one.
You get deja vu. That was literally almost the same response he gave last time, word for word.
No. Yes.
He hasn't got a clue where they are, has he? I can tell you one place they aren't, and that's Rwanda. Because the only people who sent to Rwanda is cabinet ministers. And for all the word, the ridiculous thing is, we know the Prime Minister himself doesn't even believe in this Rwanda gimmick. He had to be talked out of scrapping the whole thing. He didn't want to fund it. He didn't think it would work. When he sees his party tearing itself apart, hundreds of bald men scrapping over a single broken comb, doesn't he wish he'd had the courage to stick to his guns?
Oh, I wonder if he wrote that one himself, or if he's got a crack team of writers behind the scenes. You notice Rachel Reeves is absent from there. We'll just quickly check in and see how she's doing. You know, she's still busy looking after John Hurt there.
Well, Mr. Speaker, now, I have absolute conviction that the plan we've put in place will work. Absolute conviction, because I believe it's important that we grip this problem. Now, he spends a lot of his time in this House talking about his time as a lawyer, Mr. Speaker, and I would urge him to listen to them, because Lord Wolfe...
He was a lawyer. He was Director of Public Prosecutions. Oh, he's hardly ever mentioned that. Hardly ever. Well, this is quite a revelation. Did you know he was Director of Public Prosecutions? You would tell me his dad was a toolmaker next.
has said that our bill severely limits the... Four eminent KCs have said that it is undoubtedly the most robust piece of immigration legislation this Parliament has seen. And Mr. Speaker, a former Supreme Court...
I want to hear what the Prime Minister's got to say, because it matters to my constituents, those who feel it doesn't matter to those. Please leave, Prime Minister.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, four eminent KCs said this is undoubtedly the most robust legislation passed, and a former Supreme Court Justice has been clear that the bill would work. But I know, Mr. Speaker, he's always been more interested in what lefty lawyers have to say, Mr. Speaker. I've even got here the textbook that he authored for them. And it's called, and I quote, European Human Rights Law by Keir Starmer.
Lefty rights laws. Well, how dare he take my name in vain? Of course. But the lefty lawyers thing, that's just more pathetic dribble from Sunak there. Oh, there must be communists sticking up for human rights. I'm no fan of Starmer, of course, but need I remind you that the Tories want to take us out of the European Convention on Human Rights, and they've said that that would stop them from achieving their goals. That was a quote from Rishi Sunak from when I believe he was Chancellor before he became Prime Minister. But that's, yeah, basic human rights. That's so left-wing, isn't it? Lefty lawyers. Okay, let's crack on.
Prime Minister! Prime Minister, when I stand up, please sit down. Can I just say, we don't use props in this House, and I will certainly ensure that if you do need reminding, I certainly will.
That is actually a good point and reminder. Zara Sultana was reprimanded not too far in the distant past for holding up a poster of some kind. There are certain rules in the House of Commons, of course. You're not supposed to use props. You're not allowed to clap either, although that does happen on certain occasions, but I won't get carried away with that. So, yeah, I guess on a rare occasion of Lindsay Hoyle actually doing his job properly once, note the time and date, everyone.
It's such utterly pathetic nonsense. He's been brutally exposed by his own MPs yet again. He's got one party chair who says she hopes the Lords will rip his Rwanda deal to pieces. He's got two more who had to quit because they don't think it'll work. All of them appointed by him, all now in open revolt against his policy, each other, and reality. Is there anyone...
Whoa, hang on a minute, Keith, hang on. Your business the other week with Lindsay Hoyle and that amendment to the SNP motion, part of that was down to trying to cover up a rebellion within your own party. We all know how closely aligned the Tories and Labour are these days. Most of the things that he accuses the Tories of, he's culpable of himself.
They all think this gimmick is doomed to failure when the Prime Minister himself doesn't believe in it.
Mr. Speaker, it is rich to hear from the honourable gentleman about belief in something, because it will be news to him. It is actually the case that you can believe in something and stick to that position on this side of the House.
Well, unfortunately, Keith's so crap that Sunak has got him banged to rights there. How many pledges has he turned on? How many times has he thrown a pledge out of the window? And of course, that just gives the Tories a stick to beat him with. God's sake, Keith.
I will say to this side. Oh, hello. Somebody's jumping in from over. Can I just say it's very important. It's an important day. People want to know what's going on. So I want my constituents, just like yours, to hear what the Prime Minister's got to say. Prime Minister.
Just this week, Mr. Speaker, we had another example of the honourable gentleman doing one thing, saying another, because this week he backed the Home Secretary in banning the terrorist group Hizb ut-Tahrir, despite him personally using the European Court of Human Rights to try and stop them being banned. And don't take my word for it, Mr. Speaker. The extremist's own press release said, and I quote, "The Hizb ut-Tahrir legal team led by Keir Starmer." Now, I know he doesn't like talking about them because they've been a client, but when I see a group chanting jihad on our streets, I ban them. He invoices them.
God. Well, this is just echoing, obviously, what he said outside Downing Street, and trying to use terrorism as an excuse to take us out of the European Convention on Human Rights is quite a dodgy tactic, and one that we're going to, unfortunately, probably see more of as we get towards the election as well. Well, let's see what Keith's response is.
Because there's 8 questions that I think some of you may want. Well, I'll tell you what, there's some's already gone off the list who wanted them. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, if he stuck to his position, he'd be voting with us. He'd be voting with us. His former Home Secretary says the plan won't work. His current Home Secretary calls it batshit. His former Immigration Minister doesn't...
What? Batshit? Keith? Language? Is he gonna get called out for that? Hang on.
Be voting with us. His former Home Secretary says the plan won't work. His current Home Secretary calls it batshit. His former...
It was batshit. Okay. It's going there. That's pretty interesting.
Immigration Minister doesn't back his plan.
Can you say that?
Even the Prime Minister himself doesn't believe in it. And last week, another of his MPs said the Tories should admit that things have got worse since they came to office, that after 14 years they've left Britain less united, the country is a sadder place. If the Prime Minister can't even persuade...
Well, Keith sadly kicked any life into things since he became Labour leader, that's for sure. Things certainly have gotten sadder.
...his own MPs that it's worth supporting him, if he himself doesn't even believe in his own policies, why on earth should anyone else think differently?
Mr. Speaker, another week when it's crystal clear the honourable gentleman doesn't believe in anything and he doesn't have a plan. Now, while he talks the country down, let me update him on what's actually been happening in the past week. Inflation more than half.
And again, he's going to take that as a cue for a party political broadcast. Like some sort of salesperson at a conference.
From 11% to 4%. Real wages rising. Real wages rising for the fifth month in a row. Last week, rates started falling and millions of people benefited from a tax cut worth £450. So while he takes us back to square one with a £28 billion tax grab, let's stick with a plan that's delivering a brighter future for Britain.
Talk a little bit more about that £450 later after we briefly go over the budget as well. He seems to think he's bailing a lot of ordinary working class people out of a pit, but that equates to about £38 a month or something like that. And when you look at real term wages, when you look at inflation as well, there's always something where it appears to be going in one pocket and out of the other. That's the Tory way.
Mr. Speaker, it's against the law to silence victims of crime, but that's exactly what the Post Office did through the use of non-disclosure agreements. And this is just the most recent case of NDAs covering up mismanagement, misconduct and even crimes at work. Will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, consider banning their use in all severance agreements once and for all?
Minister.
My honourable friend is right to raise an important point, and the ability to speak out about things is key to unlocking justice. And while NDAs can have a place, my honourable friend is right to say that they shouldn't be used to stop victims of crime, in particular, getting the justice that they deserve. I can tell her that the Ministry of Justice are carefully considering how to best address this issue, including legislation, and I know that my right honourable friend, the Justice Secretary, will keep the House updated on further progress.
Leader of the SNP, Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, when people...
Here we go. Finally, someone with a bit of backbone. Stephen Flynn. Let's see what his question was.
Woke up today in homes that they can't afford to heat, with mortgages that they're struggling to pay, to news that inflation is once again on the rise. They'll have looked to Westminster for answers, and instead they find a UK government which is tearing itself apart over how quickly it can send vulnerable people on a plane to Rwanda. Surely the Prime Minister must understand that the anger that some of his own backbenchers have towards him is no comparison to the anger that the public have towards his party.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable gentleman did care about supporting working families to pay their bills, to pay their mortgage, why on earth is the SNP making Scotland the highest tax part of the United Kingdom, where the average, Mr. Speaker, not the wealthiest, where the average worker in Scotland is now paying more tax than they do in England?
Well, they're probably investing a shit ton more than you are as well. And you should know more than anybody that higher taxation will be a consequence of higher investment as well. The Tories are low tax, low state control, and low investment. And obviously pro-privatisation as well.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the Rwanda bill, the reality is that if you want to stop the smuggling gangs, you should introduce safe and legal routes. But instead, the Prime Minister is seeking to weaponise some of the most vulnerable people in society. It is straight out of the cruel and callous right-wing extremist playgroup. His time in office is fast approaching its conclusion. Does he seriously want this to be his legacy?
Prime Minister.
He's absolutely spot on, which you often see from Stephen Flynn. Of course, Sunak's emphasis on stopping the boats, as he puts it, and also the phony culture war that's coming towards us aren't the priorities of the British people. People are really struggling. They're struggling to pay the bills, they're struggling to put food on the table, struggling to get access to services, and disabled people are under a tremendous amount of strain as well. And he thinks that all people want to think about is xenophobia and other, disgusting tropes. They have nothing positive to say for themselves, obviously, after 15 years of what they've left us in. So now, without a Brexit to sell, they're reduced to that, and it's absolutely pathetic. And Stephen Flynn's on form, as always.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I said, it is important that we stop the boats because illegal migration is simply not fair, Mr. Speaker. It's not right that some people jump the queue, that they take away our resources to help those who are the most compassionate, that need our most help, and by the way, Mr. Speaker, are exploited by gangs.
Again, he's in with trying to conflate asylum seekers with illegal migrants. Asylum seeking is a perfectly legal process. And again, trying to conflate people coming from overseas as an increase in grooming gangs and this xenophobia, this attempt to label migrants as purely wanting to come here to either commit benefit fraud or commit heinous crimes. And it's revolting. It's revolting to see that the government has to stoop so low to try and win people's votes that they have to appeal to the hard right for these kind of things. Hey, Birdnest Ratfest, thanks a lot for jumping onto the chat. You feel the badness upon you. Oh, well, thanks a lot for being here anyway. Yeah, every time you watch PMQs, I guess you do feel the badness coming across you, whomever you are. And that's just the general vibe that the Tories give off anyway. But thanks a lot for joining us in the chat tonight. Just a quick reminder before we go back into PMQs, do please hit the thumbs up and notification buttons. If you want to join everybody else in the chat tonight, just hit subscribe as well. 60 seconds later, you can join in with comments and questions there. If you've got a very pertinent question, please do use the super chats. We've got those open, as well as super thanks and super stickers. It's a great way to contribute to the channel, and I do promise, as always, to read out every single super chat. So thanks a lot for helping to support us in that way. Let's get back to Dishy Rishi. Fishy Rishi, more like.
And many of them lose their lives making these dangerous crossings. So I completely disagree with the honourable gentleman. The fair and the compassionate thing to do is to break these criminal gangs, and that's why we're going to stop the boats.
Ian Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unexpectedly, 5 minutes.
In fact, just very quickly, I'm going to try and do a PMQs video or stream every week, probably a stream. And of course, people who join the channel for just 99p a month can enjoy static emojis in all of our streams, including some exclusive ones that are coming up. But I will guarantee that every week you get at least, and I will say, I'll say you'll get around 5 stop the boats out of Rishi at least. So I think that's at least the second or third time we've heard it. Let's see if he reaches the quarter through the rest of the session, which I'm pretty sure there's a decent chance he will, but that's something we'll keep our eye on every week.
Months ago, I had a heart attack. And thanks to the swift action of the NHS emergency services, it was caught early. So one stent operation later, I was on a swift path to rehabilitation and recovery, and sat here today, fighting fit and a bit lighter too. So along with encouraging everyone to visit the British Heart Foundation website to understand the early warning signs and get fantastic resources to help them, would the Prime Minister also join me in personally thanking everyone who helped to save my life and help me recover, including the East of England Ambulance Service, the teams at Watford General and Harefield Hospital, the cardiac rehabilitation teams, and everyone who supported me, especially my family and my team, some of whom are in the gallery today, to ensure that I continue to deliver for the great people of Watford.
Well, no, where was that a planted question? Of course. Yeah, unfortunate to hear that he's had a heart attack. Why don't you get up and tell him how much the Tories have stripped NHS services over the last 15 years, Rishi? I'm sure he'd love to hear that, with increased waiting times, increased waiting lists. He was probably lucky that he managed to get an ambulance at all, and probably would have been left for dead if Rishi and his predecessors had their way with the NHS, having stripped it to the bone over the last decade and a half. Yeah, why don't you tell him about that, Rishi?
I thank my honourable friend for sharing his story, and I know the whole House will be delighted to hear that he's made a swift recovery. We all wish him good health for the future as he resumes his excellent campaigning on behalf of his constituents in Watford. And I also join him in thanking our fantastic NHS staff for the life-saving work that they do up and down the country. We're backing them with record resources, from our doctors to our ambulance service. We are all in this House truly grateful for what they do.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
They're so grateful. I'm pretty sure they're all so grateful that they all have private healthcare. I'm pretty certain that Rishi Sunak does, being worth more than the King, of course, and is, together with his wife, worth over £1 billion.
Until the UK government calls for an immediate ceasefire, it is complicit in the horrors in Gaza. Not my words, but those of the head of Oxfam, who, like every single agency trying to operate on the ground, is clear that aid can't be effectively delivered while fighting continues. More UK aid is, of course, welcome, but even when it does get through, it can result in what one Palestinian aid worker calls bombing us on full stomachs. 24,000 people have already been killed. So can he tell us what will it take for him to back a permanent bilateral ceasefire?
Mr. Speaker, of course we want to see a peaceful resolution to this conflict as soon as possible.
Well then, stop sending weapons to Israel for a start, dickhead. Stop arming and funding the country committing the collective punishment. That would be a start, would it not?
A sustainable, permanent ceasefire with an end to the destruction, fighting and loss of life, release of hostages and no resumption of hostilities would of course be the best way forward. But in order to achieve that, a number of things need to happen. Hamas would have to agree to release all the hostages. Hamas would no longer have to be in charge of Gaza, and the threat of more rocket attacks from Hamas into Israel would have to end. And the Palestinian Authority, boosted with assistance, would need to return to Gaza in order to provide governance and aid. That is the sustainable ceasefire that we will work very hard to bring about.
Nick Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I was unsure whether to raise a national issue, such as the desperate need for a Minister for Men, or a local issue, such as Doncaster's need for a new hospital or Edlington for a new leisure centre. But I thought the best thing I could do is ask the Prime Minister to come and have a tour of Doncaster. And while I'm showing him around my hometown, I can press the need for a Minister for Men. I can show him the site for a new hospital. And
A Minister for Men? Is that what he's saying? What kind of... I mean, obviously this is another planted question. What fresh lunacy is this? We've had a Minister for Common Sense. We've got a Minister for Levelling Up, which is obviously just a facade. Equality, is that what it's supposed to mean by levelling up? Which, of course, hasn't happened even in their terms, in uniting, in shortening the wealth gap, I should say. What is this all about? Minister for Men? Oh, of course, the most oppressed demographic in society. White middle-class men, of course, need their own minister to look after them. Is that seriously what this guy's proposing? What a load of bollocks.
I can introduce him to the people of Edlington so he can discuss their new leisure centre. So will the Prime Minister accept my invitation?
Well, thanks to my honourable friend's fantastic campaigning on behalf of his constituents. Doncaster City Council has received, I think, more than £80 million in levelling up funding to support its regeneration products. And most recently, Doncaster has been awarded £20 million in our long-term plan for towns over the next 10 years, which I know he is working very hard to make sure is prioritised for local people. I would be delighted to discuss those projects and his other ideas when I come and visit him as soon as my diary allows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 71% of requests for funding from the Community Ownership Fund aimed at saving libraries, pubs and village halls have been rejected since 2021. It pits communities against each other and does nothing to address the underlying causes that have led to the loss of these much-loved assets. When will the government offer more than a simple sticking plaster for our towns, high streets and communities?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I set up the Community Ownership Fund when I was Chancellor, and it is doing fantastic work, funding hundreds of projects across the country, including, I believe...
How many libraries and other public services have Tories closed over the last 15 years? This is ridiculous. Throwing a few crumbs on the table towards the end of a term is purely just an insult when you look back over the last 15 years and you see what the Conservative Party has taken away in terms of public services in this country. Utterly, utterly ridiculous.
One in the Honourable Lady's own constituency, the back on that scheme. It is there to support local communities to take over assets, whether it's pubs, village halls or other community assets, and it's doing a fantastic job. It's right that there's a competitive process because we want to make sure that that money is deployed in the areas where it can make the most difference.
Greg Smith.
That's pure nonsense as well. Think about how many pubs have closed as well. And if you're a fan of music, maybe live music venues as well. Other things like that. So many. And we've seen it in every town, practically every town across the country and in cities as well. And now there's so many cut and paste precincts, as you've seen other people comment on, you know, the bookmakers, the pasty shop, and then a pub and a supermarket. Cut and paste, repeat. Country's in decline, and he's acting as though he's got something to be proud of and something to gloat about. Pure bile from Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Overcrowding on Chiltern railways has become a daily misery for commuters from stations like Hadnam and Tame Parkway and Princes Risborough in my constituency, the root cause of which is an ageing fleet constantly breaking down and shorter trains having to be run. There are proposals on the table for both short-term additional capacity and long-term fleet renewal. So will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, instruct the Department for Transport to fast-track those proposals so we can end overcrowding on Chiltern?
Prime Minister.
And I agree with my honourable friend that the performance on Chiltern hasn't been good enough in recent times. I know that Chiltern have recently begun engagement with the rolling stock leasing market, which will help reduce overcrowding, but also together with DFT, they're looking at providing additional capacity at peak times. So I know my honourable friend, the Rail Minister, will ensure that these plans continue to progress and keep my honourable friend updated.
Patrick Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What exactly is it?
They'll keep him updated, which is basically just fobbing him off there. And you shouldn't say fast track as well in front of Rishi Sunak. You might have to point out just what a disaster HS2 has been. Behind schedule, massively over budget, and it's not even going to go the full length of the country as promised. Don't forget that the last election, they basically had two things in the manifesto, and that was Brexit and HS2. And look how both of those worked out.
About the prospect of deportation to Rwanda that makes the government think it will be such a deterrent to asylum seekers. Does it think that life in Rwanda is somehow less comfortable, less secure, less safe than it is here in the United Kingdom? What does the government think is wrong with Rwanda that means asylum seekers won't want to live there?
It's not that there's anything wrong with it, it's just that it's not the United Kingdom, Mr. Speaker. And I have to point out to the honourable gentleman that deterrence works. We know that it works because our scheme with Albania has ensured a 90% reduction in arrivals from that country.
What's a Therese Coffey?
Mr. Speaker, I know my right honourable friend the Prime Minister is committed to energy security and the development of renewables, as am I, and that's why Sizewell C started...
Oh, what a load of absolute tripe from Therese Coffey. Former Environment Secretary. Look, fossil fuel companies currently get subsidised about £250 million a week, okay? You've seen oil fields such as Rosebank set to be open in the North Sea. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fossil fuel contracts. Rishi Sunak doesn't care about the environment whatsoever. To suggest that he does is pure nonsense, pure lunacy, misdirection, and dare I say, more gaslighting from the Tory party as Therese Coffey comes shouting from the back benches here. It's absolutely ridiculous to suggest that. Obviously, climate experts have been very aware of this for a while. If we're going to stay under 2 degrees of global warming, let alone 1.5 as an average global temperature rise, then things really do have to change very rapidly. And if anything, this country is going the wrong way. It's absolute shambles.
DCO this week. However, there are plenty of other developments which are happening on greenfield sites where CPOs are planned to be used by National Grid to plough up farming fields used for food but also tree production as well, when there are brownfield sites already available connected to the network. National Grid is refusing to publish its study of Bradwell and why they deem it would not be suitable for this connection of offshore wind farms and interconnectors. Will he meet with me to discuss this and other East Anglian MPs, and also to use the powers of his office to get that study published?
As my honourable friend will know, that planning applications for new infrastructure are managed independently, so I can't comment on specific cases, but I do agree with her that it's important to listen to the views of local communities like those that she represents across Suffolk and East Anglia. I know my honourable friend for Aberdeenshire West was visiting her area recently to mark the commencement of the project at Sizewell C, and I can assure her that relevant ministers will continue to pay close attention to her concerns.
Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the House last week correctly described the contaminated blood scandal as on another level compared to other scandals. Now that Sir Brian Langstaff has announced today the publication of the final report of the infected blood inquiry, he reminds us, Mr. Speaker, that his principal recommendation remains that a compensation scheme should be set up with urgency and that no one should be in any doubt about the serious nature of the failings over more than 6 decades that led to catastrophic loss of life and compounded suffering. Prime Minister, over 100 parliamentarians wrote to you this week, so can you tell us now when those affected will be paid compensation for their loss.
Mr. Speaker, I'm acutely aware of the strength of feeling on this issue and indeed the suffering of all of those impacted by this dreadful scandal. I gave evidence to the inquiry last year, and as I said then, I recognise the suffering that thousands have experienced over decades. He will know that the Minister for the Cabinet Office updated Parliament on this towards the end of last year. He'll know it's a highly complex issue. Interim payments have been made in some cases, and we are committed, absolutely committed, to responding to the final report as quickly as possible following its publication.
Robert Neal.
Mr. Speaker, last week, Conservative-controlled Bromley Council's children's services were rated outstanding by Ofsted in all 4 areas of inspection, only the 3rd time that has happened under the current framework. Will he join me in congratulating the officers and members of Bromley Council and perhaps even visit Bromley and see our new cost-saving civic centre?
Well, perhaps not quite on my way to Doncaster, but I'll bear it in mind. But can I join my honourable friend in paying tribute to Bromley Council and all the officers involved in providing what is an incredibly important service in their local community and looking after some of the most vulnerable children in our society. They all deserve our thanks and our praise for their brilliant efforts.
Dr. Rupert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Another ridiculous planted question, of course.
HS2 promised to transform intercity travel and my seat where Old Oak Common will be one day. But after Leeds and Manchester were ditched, its London end's now in doubt. Could the PM today commit to ensuring it at least reaches Euston, or is he intent on stopping all transport forms, except private jets, maybe?
Prime Minister.
Well, yeah, good question. Just mentioned HS2 a moment ago, and further problems as well now. Is anything going to happen? It's never going to happen, is it? HS2, let's be honest.
I think her leader might have something to say about the forms of transportation, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps on HS2 as well, because I still haven't actually heard from him his position on the whole subject. But we have, Mr. Speaker, I would say Old Oak Common is destined to be one of the foremost stations in the country because of the station and the extra connectivity that it will have across London as the initial terminus for HS2 trains. And as we said at the announcement, we are working with the private sector, as we have done in other developments in London, to raise private money, save the taxpayer money, and deliver the connection to Euston as planned.
But what will happen with the private profits then, Rishi? Does that go back into public investment? No, it doesn't. And that's why public ownership and nationalisation is the way to go, instead of putting hundreds of billions of pounds into private rail companies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've just got back from the inaugural Women's Health Summit. During the summit, it was announced that the specialist maternal mental health services will now be available to women in every part of England by March. This is particularly pertinent for me after one of my constituents, Jessica Cronshaw, passed away whilst pregnant with her baby Elsie after suffering with severe pregnancy sickness, hyperemesis gravidarum. So can I thank the government for following through with this important reform and push him to keep going with the spirit of this reform so our NHS is fit for women in the future?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for raising this matter, and I know the whole House will want to convey our sympathy.
How many planted questions are we going to get here?
That we are making will make a difference to women across the country in the future. We're committed to our women's health strategy, and I'm grateful that for her support and, again, her advice and ideas, so we can ensure it delivers the care that we want it to across the country.
Andrew Gwynn.
The Conservative candidate for the Wellingborough by-election yesterday revealed that the Conservative Party had offered her a deal to be the candidate if the previous member, her partner, stood down without a fuss. The Prime Minister said just last week that candidate selection is all done locally within his party. So would he now like to deny that this secret deal was offered?
I'm sure that Sunak would be more than pleased to stand up and deny and lie in the House of Commons without being held to account, by all means.
Mr. Speaker, as I said last week, in our party, candidate selection is done locally.
James Gray.
Mr. Speaker, would my right honourable friend the Prime Minister agree with me that a remote rural hotel is just the wrong place to house asylum seekers and refugees from their point of view? And will you therefore join me in thanking the Home Secretary for announcing yesterday that the Wiltshire Hotel outside Rolwyn Bassett is in fact to be returned to its proper purpose in April?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question. He's absolutely right. The use of hotels is unfair, and also it's unfair on local communities, and also costs taxpayers £8 million a day. And that's why our plans to reduce the number of people coming has meant that we could close the first 50 hotels across the country, with more to follow. And I thank the Home Secretary and his team for their efforts. But fundamentally, the only way to resolve this once and for all is to implement our Rwanda scheme, so we can have a working deterrent, and that's how we will stop the boats.
Charlotte Nichols.
Bing, bing, bing. That's another stop the boats. I'll say that's the fourth one now. We're just one away from hitting the 5:15, the expected return of 5 stop the boats. Just one more to go.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been contacted by desperate constituents who have rung every single pharmacy within a 50-mile radius of Warrington and still haven't been able to access their medication for ADHD. This has been going on for months and isn't just a Warrington issue. Pharmacists are calling it the worst shortage ever seen, with only 11% of people able to access their full dose this month. And ADHD UK have called the government's response pathetic. They're right, aren't they?
Yes.
So I'm very sorry to hear about the situation in the Honourable Lady's constituency, but the Health Secretary obviously heard what she said and is in touch with the relevant drug bodies to make sure we can have the provision of ADHD medicine to all of those who need it.
What a cop-out.
For around a decade, over 200 of my constituents in the Mill complex in Ipswich have been caught in the cruellest form of limbo. There's deep structural problems with the building and cladding problems. A few years ago, they got about £15 million out of court settlement to make a contribution towards the cladding cost. The freeholder, NAMA, the Irish financial entity set up after the Irish banking crisis, ran away with that money, putting my residents and my constituents back in square one with little to no hope. Will the Prime Minister talk to the Irish tea shop to raise this immoral case, and also meet with me to discuss a way forward for my constituents, who I meet with every week?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about my honourable friend's case, but I'll ensure that the government looks into the details and gets back to him in shortest order about how we can support him and his constituents.
Martin Doherty's last question.
Number 10, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I have repeatedly expressed my commitment to joint working with the First Minister of Scotland to deliver for the people across the country.
Martin Doherty.
I'm grateful for that answer, Mr. Speaker. While there's rightly been much attention paid to the Post Office Horizon scandal, there is another shocking example of government and private sector collusion that began under the last Labour administration and continued under the Tories. Mr. Speaker, almost 200,000 mortgage prisoners who borrowed with high street lenders such as Northern Rock have become trapped after the portfolio was sold off to foreign entities like Topaz Finance and Heliodor, who have been creaming off extortionate revisionary standard variable rates essentially since 2008, leaving even those who kept up with payments in danger of having their home repossessed. 200,000 aspirant homeowners have had their dream taken away from. So can the Prime Minister, instead of playing catch-up with like he is doing with the Post Office scandal, meet with me and campaigners to discuss what more can be done for mortgage prisoners?
Mr. Speaker, I am familiar with the situation for mortgage prisoners, and something I worked on as Chancellor, and I know the Treasury and the current Chancellor have been engaging with campaign groups and others to find ways to resolve it. It's not an easy situation to fix overnight, but there are things that are being looked at as we speak.
Douglas Ross.
Speaker, yesterday the Scottish Whisky Association published a report looking at the economic impact of the sector, not just in Scotland but across the whole of the UK. Some of the highlights included that in 2022 they generated £7.1 billion in gross value added, £2.1 billion has been invested in capital projects between 2018 and 2022, and 41,000 jobs are supported by the sector in Scotland, including 1 in 9 in my Murray constituency. Does the Prime Minister agree that supporting the Scotch whisky industry in the forthcoming spring budget and beyond is a correct priority for this government.
Well, my honourable friend is a superb...
Oh, Douglas Ross. God. Well, we'll be going into the budget later. Obviously, another massively planted question there. Just shout out to a couple of comments in the chat as well. JC Vascod, thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah, Rishi's clean you out before he runs back to his home country in America. Yeah, of course, he's a non-dom. And Birdnest Ratfest, Rickshaw, Shunak, Galloway did shake him up. We're going to be taking a look more at what Galloway's been up to shortly, just as we get towards the end of PMQs. Thanks a lot for staying with us tonight on the live stream as well. Thanks a lot for subscribing. Please do hit the thumbs up, notification buttons and everything. Super chats, super thanks and super stickers are active. Please do use those. It's a great way to help support the channel. And please consider joining one of our membership tiers as well from just 99p per month. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Ambassador for Murray and for Scotch whisky, and he's right, it's a hugely successful export industry that supports tens of thousands of skilled jobs across Scotland. I won't obviously tread on the Chancellor's toes about future budgets.
Well, Scotland isn't very favourable towards you, Sunak. What have they got? One? They've got one MP, is it? Scottish Parliament. And they're not going to be making any gains there in the next general election, that's for sure.
But I am proud of this government's track record in supporting the industry, having removed US tariffs on Scotch whisky, reduced tariffs and deals with countries like Morocco and Argentina, and also supporting the sector's interest in our FTAs with Australia, New Zealand, and most recently with CPTPP.
Peter Dowd.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been very keen to take credit for falling inflation in previous months. Will he now take responsibility for today's rise?
Mr. Speaker, inflation was over 11% when I got this job. Inflation today is 4%, Mr. Speaker. In common with the US, France, Germany, all countries have seen a mild tick-up in December. All countries have. But the crucial thing is that inflation has been more than halved, delivered ahead of schedule, and that is having an enormous benefit to families up and down the country. Benefit that would be reversed by his party's plan to saddle them with £28 billion of tax rises.
Well, as he said, they've gone up, and if he's referring to the Green Pledge, if that's what the 28 billion was, then Labour have abandoned that as well. Yeah, that's the truth of it, Sunak, unfortunately.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a keen park runner in Walsall, but I'm also part of the core team of volunteers that recently brought Parkrun to Tamworth. So in the 20th anniversary year of Parkrun, will the Prime Minister join me in encouraging other towns that don't yet have a parkrun to get one?
Prime Minister.
Well, it's great to hear that my honourable friend is an avid park runner, and I thank him for actually volunteering so that the people of Tamworth can enjoy one too. I completely agree with him. When I had more time, I was a regular at the North Allerton Park Run and the Junior Park Run as well, which I recommend for those with children. It is a fantastic and accessible way to get people moving, and I join him in encouraging everyone to get involved in his local area and beyond.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the last general election, residents in West Hertfordshire were promised a new hospital, but we are still waiting for the green light and having to put up with broken lifts and overly crowded treatment wards. In other parts of the country, there are entire hospital buildings that have had to be closed down, like the one in Stepping Hill in Stockport, because they are structurally unsafe. From broken promises on new hospitals to the backlog of repairs, people are sick and tired of waiting. So can the Prime Minister tell me, by the time of the next general election, how many of the broken hospitals will be fixed, and will my residents be able to point to a single spade in the ground?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, we're investing record sums to not just deliver 40 new hospitals across the country, but 90 different hospitals.
Are they still trying to say that with the 40 new hospitals? Of course, it turned out that was a load of crap as well. They did refurbishments on some existing hospitals and counted that towards a new hospital. You'll remember that from a few years ago. They still want people to believe that they're building 40 new hospitals. So, what's the latest lie that he's going to put on top of this one as well? 90 new... What is it?
Upgrades.
Upgrades.
And she'll be familiar with the plans, I hope, at West Hertfordshire Trust to develop a new emergency and specialty care facility at Watford General, including women's and children's services. It will make an enormous difference to residents in the area.
Believe it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A recent BBC News article raised fears that Blyth could become a ghost town, as we see our shopping centre closed to be replaced by a new higher education facility. Residents are right to be concerned, and I have personally seen decades of Labour neglect and decline in our town. And I really have. But this Conservative government has invested hundreds of millions of pounds to level up my constituency with spades in the ground as I speak here in the House of Commons. Can my right honourable friend assure me that the rebirth of our towns will continue as a key focus of this Conservative government?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I commend him for being such a strong advocate for Blyth. And nearly half...
Because they turned a dilapidated shopping centre into a higher education facility, yeah. Pretty sure the Tories won't be too keen on that. People are trying to educate themselves instead of being mindless consumers. We can't have that.
Of the recent Towns Fund has been distributed to northern regions in England to level up constituencies like his own, and that is the difference. As he said, after years, if not decades, of neglect under the party opposite, it's this government that is levelling up across our country.
15 years they've been in for. 15 years. How many times do I have to say it? How many times do we have to remind them that the time has long since passed where they can blame the previous government?
Final question, Ian Mans.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker. In June 2022, to some fanfare, the government announced the approval of £41 million for a package of works for the restoration of the Tyne Bridge, which is the route of the A167, the old A1, and it connects Gateshead with Newcastle city centre, and is instantly recognisable around the world as an emblem of Tyneside. However, the funding is still awaiting sign-off within the Department of Transport, and work cannot progress. So given the scale and the complexity of the work that's required, and the significant additional cost implications if funding doesn't come forward, can we actually have the money, please, to get on with the work so that the bridge will be ready for its centenary celebrations in 2028?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll ensure that the relevant minister gets back to him with an update on the project, and I'm pleased not just investing in that project in his area, but also following on from the last question, I know his area has received levelling up funding worth £20 million to help transform the visitor economy in Gateshead. Yet more example of this government investing to level up across the north and across the country.
Is it just me as we come to the conclusion there? Does anyone else get nauseous every time you hear levelling up or level up? Like I mentioned earlier, it's of course a complete facade. The wealth gap is getting wider and wider. There's not any investment happening in poor areas of the country. We're just seeing taxpayer money go into private and rich people's hands, whilst ordinary working people get left behind, as usual. And that's the Tory way. So perhaps, as well as stop the boats counter, which I'm going to have in place for next week's PMQs, maybe I should put a levelling up counter as well, and maybe we could turn that into a bit of a game. We'll see which one wins out, but I'm guessing at least that we'll get at least 5 stop the boats per PMQs.
That completes Prime Minister's questions.
Yep, you can all sort off. Go on. Back to your houses. You've done your bit. Okay, so Galloway didn't get to speak there, as we were wondering whether he'd be making an appearance since his recent election. Obviously, he was in Parliament for the ceremony of being sworn in as well. We did a video about that as well. But that was PMQs. Let us know what you thought about that session in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this on a replay, of course. If you would like to join in the chat on the live stream, just hit the subscribe button if you've not done so already. There's just a 60-second delay there, and then you can join in with everybody else on the chat. It's great to see everybody here tonight. Thanks a lot for your likes and shares and everything like that. We're just going to take a brief comedy interlude now as we're part way through the stream before we go on to quickly talk on about Jeremy. It's written here somewhere. Got it written down. Jeremy Hunt's mini budget statement, as well as Galloway's appearance in Lewisham campaigning for the Workers' Party of Britain there again. But we're going to go across to someone I know that viewers of our live streams and fans of the channel are already familiar with. I'm a big fan of his as well, Jonathan Pye. So we're going to see his latest release while we just take a little comedic break.
After what happened in the wake of the last election, many would have thought this impossible. The last time Donald Trump was on a ballot in a free and fair national election, he lost, refused to accept the results, and incited a deadly riot on Capitol Hill. And yet, Donald Trump will be on the ballot again, and all signs point towards a Trump-Biden rematch this November. Trump. That's all you're going to hear until November. Trump. And then, if I'm right, of course, for the next 4 years after that, because I can't see a way that he loses this rematch. Trump. I honestly thought we'd seen the back of him. You know, I thought after his supporters took to the Capitol to hang Mike Pence and take a shit on Nancy Pelosi's desk, I thought things would settle down. But it seems as if January the 6th was like childbirth or a Big Mac. You forget how awful it was, and with enough time, you'll just give it another go. So I kind of thought he might be in prison by now. Instead, he's subsequently managed to persuade almost 40% of Americans that Biden stole the election from him. Trump. He is chaos. He is everywhere. From a news and current affairs perspective, he's omnipotent. He's like God or Alison Hammond on every fucking channel, everywhere you look. It's insane that someone who is so glaringly unfit and unable to do the job of president could get anywhere near the Oval Office again. And there's the real problem. With this election, I could be talking about either candidate, Trump or Biden, a man who can barely string a sentence together up against a man who can barely string a sentence together. Trump, an insurrectionist and convicted fraudster guilty of tax offences on an industrial scale, an approved rapist in the civil courts, is on the ballot for president. And, according to the Democrats, of the 675 million US citizens that are eligible to run for president against him, there's only one man who can stop Trump, Joe Biden, about as dynamic as a digestive biscuit. A man who, when he walks into the room, everyone's going like, sorry, did he just escape from a home? A home for, let's be honest, nearly dead people. And on the ticket with him, a heartbeat away from the presidency, a woman only slightly more popular than Captain Tom Moore's daughter's sauna and steam room. Kamala Harris, living proof that liberals picking candidates on gender and skin colour alone isn't always electoral magic. Talent and charm can often go a long way as well. When will liberals learn to beat Trump? You don't need to have right on your side. You need decent candidates on your side. But as it stands, I cannot see a way that Trump doesn't retake the White House. Trump. It's like boots marching. Trump. Scary military boots marching. Unstoppable. Trump. Trump, Trump, Trump. And I know just banding around words like fascism and dictator and despot are, you know, generally lazy comparisons. But if you listen really carefully, Trump, 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 it does sound a little bit like they're goose-stepping. Trump, 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 goose-stepping into the Oval Office because Sleepy Joe and his Democrats were taking their afternoon nap. Trump, 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 yeah. Well, this could be an uphill battle for President Biden as polls this week suggest Trump edging ahead.
Great stuff from Jonathan Pye as always. Yeah, he's bang on. Not really covered too much about the American election so far on the channel. That's a whole another can of worms, of course, when you're dealing with Donald Trump. They don't exactly have a great choice as well between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Arguably, Trump's position on the situation in Gaza is going to be even worse than Joe Biden's. He's very, very pro-Israel, pro-Zionist. And of course, we've seen the sort of things to expect from his previous term as well, so it's hardly something to look forward to. Jonathan Pye, spot on as always. If you've not checked out his other stuff, please do. If only our real media could be as honest and on the ball as Jonathan Pye. Once we get into the nitty-gritty of the US election, we'll start to do more videos about that, but obviously it's a very long-winded process in America, and not really touched on the primaries and things like that on the channel so far. But what a choice. Genocide Joe or Donald Trump? Hardly any choice at all, really, is it? The illusion of choice, as they say. Okay, on to the next part of the show now. We're going to quickly have a look through Jeremy Hunt's budget. As I said at the top of the show, we're not going to be playing the full statement, of course. I'm sure that you'd rather watch grass grow or paint dry than be subjected to that. We're just going to go through some of the finer points. Okay, just bear with me. Might have to readjust the size here. Or positioning. Yeah, there we go. Okay, we'll just quickly go through some of the finer points, as I said. So, reduction of workers' national insurance by 2p. Obviously, when you look at inflation and things like this, it really is in one hand and out of the other. Whilst they're putting a few coins into your palm, the other hand's reaching around the back and running off with your full wallet. There's also an increase to child benefit threshold from £50,000 to £60,000 and to the VAT threshold for small businesses to £90,000. That's made headlines, this article says, along with higher taxes on vapes and business class flights. Tories were at one point accused of the idea, theft by Labour, after Hunt announced the non-dom tax system will be abolished. The new arrivals to come to the UK, however, will still not pay taxes on foreign income for 4 years. Rishi Sunak, are you listening? What a coincidence that that delay has been put on whilst so many non-doms are in cabinet and in government. The budget drew ire from Labour leader Sir Keith Starmer, who called the budget a last desperate act, adding that people are now paying more and more for less and less. Well, won't really expect anything different under a Labour government either, I'm afraid, Keith. New official forecasts say the government will collect 37.1 pence per pound in gross domestic product in 2028-2029, the highest level in nearly 80 years. Lib Dem leader Ed Davey also took aim at the budget, which he says won't touch the sides of families and pensioners struggling with the cost of living, telling the BBC this really is bad news for people. Yeah, there's nothing there. There's nothing there really to help out ordinary people. He's tried to get a lot of attention on this cutting national insurance by 2 pence. Supposedly giving people £450 a year extra. That works out to about 38 quid a month. But as I said, with costs rising, inflation, as well as other things, when you put that into real terms, people are either in the same position or worse off, as usual, with the Tories. The article also says the economic and political backdrop for the Chancellor today was painted in such vivid primary colours: a stagnating economy combined with the Tories being a million miles behind in the opinion polls. Yeah, I think they're polling around 20% at the moment, which is disastrous. I do take a lot of polls with a pinch of salt, as I say, but that doesn't look great for the Tories. Where these votes and seats are going to go to is, of course, still up for debate. The article also says changing the composition of these realities in one go would be nigh on impossible. Little in today's budget comes as a surprise. Almost all of it was trialled in advance. The drop in national insurance, particularly when combined with the same cut announced a few months back, is a substantial tax cut. But the ballooning tax take means the rhetoric of tax cutting confronts the reality of other taxes climbing for lots of folks. This, alongside inflation, mortgage rates and the tax devoted to servicing the national debt, now leaves a powerful lingering feeling for many that they are still paying more while getting less. These are the so-called tough choices that the Tories will tell you that they have to make when it comes to the crunch. It's always more tax relief and other benefits for the advantaged, for the wealthy, and less for working people, for working class people. That the article says that'll be the sentiment that Labour is seeking to seize upon, although knowing Keith, he probably won't. He'll probably just give us more of the same as usual. The Conservatives will argue today's budget amounts to the steady rebuilding of the economy after the shocks of recent years, and while there's been much speculation in recent weeks, this was not a budget that felt like the certain razor for a general election in May. Everyone's talking about a general election in May. Obviously that's not been announced yet, although it's now considered to be highly likely. Sunak's certainly not come out and denied it. Most of the political commentators seem to agree that they think that's when this is going to be the next time people go to the ballot. But it might not be so straightforward as just Labour having a walk in the park, as we've said before, and with George Galloway's recent victory as well. That does really put the cat amongst the pigeons, so to speak. We're going to shortly go on to talk about Galloway's latest escapades in Lewisham, where he's been campaigning for the Workers' Party of Britain. Of course, they've got a mayoral election tomorrow, so we'll be keeping tabs on that. Just a quick reaction from some major charities on the Chancellor's decision to extend financial support fund for people in England struggling with the cost of living, which is just good old poverty. I don't really like the term cost of living. To be honest, it does seem to just be sort of Tory lexicon, Tory syntax for poverty. The cost of living crisis is just poverty rebranded as far as I'm concerned. So Jeremy Hunt cited campaigning by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and the Trussell Trust, which announced it's a good job that Liz Truss isn't the Chancellor, otherwise that really would be a mouthful. Anyway, the Trussell Trust, when announcing that the Household Support Fund would receive an additional £500 million, allowing it to continue for another 6 months. Paul Kissack, Chief Executive of Joseph Rowntree Foundation, says the Chancellor was right to extend the scheme, but it doesn't equate to fixing the fundamental problem that made its existence necessary. Yeah, of course, just that continuing for another 6 months isn't really a lot at all. More crumbs on the table on this budget for sure. Meanwhile, the Trussell Trust's Helen Bernard says Hunt has offered only temporary sticking plasters instead of long-term solutions to the crisis of rising hunger, hardship and debt. Of course, it's always the case. When it's raining, instead of getting up and fixing the roof, the Tories just try and look for low-budget buckets to stick under the leaks, and the real solutions to the problem never come about. Action for Children suggests that the budget measures indicated the government was swept up in pre-election fever and had largely ignored children and families struggling in poverty. That, of course, applies to their entire tenureship that we've had to put up with for the last decade and a half, of course. Just have a quick listen to the human ostrich hybrid himself, Jeremy Hunt. Let's see what he's got to say. Very briefly, it's just a minute long, this clip.
Let's look at the numbers, because in 5 years' time, tax receipts will be up by £20 billion, even accounting for your cuts in national insurance. So people are being clobbered, aren't they, for all of this talk of tax cuts? That's baloney. People are paying more.
Well, one of the reasons that tax receipts are higher is because the economy is set to get back to more growth.
And it's also because the thresholds for paying various rates of tax are frozen as people's incomes are rising. They're paying more.
Yes, but even if you take account of the thresholds, what you will see next year is a big cut in taxation for families earning the average income. It's a significant cut, and what we're saying is, look, there was a one-off. We had a pandemic. It was right to help families through the pandemic. Now we're through that. Now the economy is growing. Now we've got inflation down according to our plan. We want to bring taxes down, and we made a decisive step towards that today.
Well, he's completely ignored the reality of the situation that was put to him by the interviewer, as always. And would we expect anything less from a Tory Chancellor, any Tory Chancellor, let alone human ostrich hybrid Jeremy Hunt? Well, I, for one, certainly wouldn't either. And the burden that's been putting on, that the Tory party have put on families over the last 15 years is incredible. And what was that about things coming down next year? So this is kind of a loaded budget in the sense that anything negative that comes out of it, he's saying, is going to be washed away next year. But of course, there's a catch, there's strings attached. That means that you'll have to vote for them. They'll have to come in for another term, which would put us up to 20 consecutive years of Tory government. 5 was bad enough, 10 was bad enough, we've gone through 15. There's no way we really want to face 20 years of that. But people have been making waves, of course. It doesn't necessarily mean that Labour are going to come in. If Labour do win the election, unfortunately, it's just going to be more of the same as far as I'm concerned. In a lot of areas, they're going to be worse than the Tories, of course. I'm not going to go into the debates about how much of a majority or success Keith might have at the next election. Just want to quickly point out that people do have a choice, as was proven to much fanfare recently in Rochdale, where Labour and the Tories came third and fourth place, with obviously George Galloway winning the seat and an independent coming second. If it can happen there, it can happen anywhere, and we could see a lot of shake-ups at this election, as I said. So we're going to quickly dive into what George Galloway has been up to in Lewisham. We do have a video out about that at the moment. I should just quickly say that's set to members only at the moment. You can join us with a membership for just 99p for the live stream, or for just $2.99 you can get exclusive access to videos and early access to all of our content as well. So in that, we do go into depth about this upcoming mayoral by-election. I'm just going to go over one or two of the details with you here as well. This is Damien Egan. He might look familiar because he has been mentioned in another election recently as well. Of course, we did some coverage of that. You remember in Kingswood, and that was one of the 2 by-elections recently that Labour just about managed to get over the line in. However, Damien Egan, who you can see here, used to be the Mayor of Lewisham. He stepped out of that position so that he could run for candidate in Kingswood. Not sure exactly the reasons behind that. Maybe just he would have preferred an MP's salary as opposed to a mayoral salary, but that remains to be seen. So of course it's left the mayoral seats open for a by-election in Kingswood. Just quickly remind you can check out our previous video on that as well, where we do talk about it being more a case of Tory voters staying at home while Labour limped over the line. So he did actually win that by-election. We're going to hear what George Galloway had to say in a speech now, out in public, out on the campaign trail, and we'll have a look at some of the candidates as well. This by-election is happening tomorrow. We'll try and keep you up to speed with that, of course, as always, with anything else that we cover on the My Left Eye live stream. Just quickly before we go over to the clip, just a very quick reminder, hit the subscription, thumbs up, notification buttons. Please do consider posting a super chat or super thanks or super sticker. Great way to help contribute towards the channel. And as I said, we've also got some great membership packages if you'd like to consider joining, contributing in that way. Many thanks. All contributions greatly appreciated, as always. And if you'd like to make a one-off contribution, please do consider visiting our Buy Us a Coffee page. Links are in the description of both the channel and the title of this video. So over to George Galloway in Lewisham now.
When the Israeli armed forces, who call themselves the most moral army in the world, having already murdered her whole family, the little girl was in the car with all the dead bodies of her family, and then they killed her as well. How is it possible to support that? How is it possible not to be moved by that? And yet, our leaders appear entirely unmoved. Maybe they don't look at the pictures, maybe they don't look at the videos, but they seem oblivious to the fact that tens, scores of millions of people in this country can't take their eyes off the slaughter. They're completely broken-hearted about what's happening. And our politicians say, when people vote against genocide parties, that we're extreme. What's extreme about being opposed to genocide? What's extreme about being opposed to the killing of children and women? I tell you this, it's our political class and the media that serve them. It's they who are the extremists, not us. We're the peace marchers. We're the peace protesters. So, I'm going to tell you bluntly, if you vote for Labour or Conservative on Thursday in Lewisham, you have voted for genocide. You have turned your face away from little Hind, from little Sidra hanging on the wall, minus her legs. You've got an opportunity. I mean, John Hamilton didn't drop in by parachute. He's been a fixture of politics in this borough for as long as I have been associated with it, which is more than 20 years. John Hamilton would be an admirable mayor. He'd be a mayor to be proud of. You'd be able to see him on the television and say, I'm proud that he is my mayor. We're not asking you just to vote for anybody. We're asking you to vote for someone who really is somebody. John Hamilton for mayor on Thursday. Get out and vote. Get your families out. Get your neighbours out. Get your friends out. Let's have a big vote for John Hamilton for mayor of Lewisham.
Well, since George Galloway's victory in Rochdale, a lot more people have come forward as candidates for the Workers' Party of Britain. Obviously, this is a mayoral seat, not a parliamentary seat, but they are growing in numbers. He's also, since he was elected last week, declared that he's going to be looking to take Angela Rayner, the shadow deputy prime minister's seat as well. So that could turn out to be pretty interesting and we'll see how many seats that the Workers' Party of Britain end up standing in. But they certainly are looking to take on both the Labour and Tories at the upcoming general election. Let's just have a quick look at some of the other candidates as well. Just bear with me there. Okay, so there's 7 candidates altogether. Labour and Co-op have put up Brenda Dacre. Workers' Party of Britain, as we just mentioned, John Hamilton there. Michael Heron will be representing the Green Party. Nick Long for the Independents. Chris Mains is a Liberal Democrats candidate. Maureen Martin is representing the Christian People's Alliance, and Seema Kadar is part of the local Conservatives, which, of course, although they've tried to change the name to try and make you think that they're not the Conservative Party, they still really are the Conservatives, despite putting local in front of it. I think we've got John Hamilton's page up. Just a sec. So this is the guy. There we go. You can see the thumbnail. A couple of videos there. It's John Lewisham, who's going to be representing the Workers' Party of Britain. Would be interesting. It would be interesting. I should just point out, obviously, the previous mayor was a Labour candidate, so that would mean them taking the seat from Labour again. So will we see a repeat of what happened in Rochdale? That'll be pretty interesting to find out. We've mentioned before as well, other metrics such as a council by-election in Keir Starmer's seat, which the Green Party won. They're also set to take a Bristol, I think it was a Bristol seat from Labour as well. That's, again, according to the polls, which you do have to take with a pinch of salt, of course. But that's the situation in Lewisham. We will, of course, bring you the result. Like I said, we've done a full video on that as well. That's something you can get access to if you'd like to sign up for one of our membership packages. Got 2 packages at the moment, one for live streams, another one for live streams as well as exclusive and early viewing content, plus loads of other perks as well. Thanks a lot for joining us on the My Left Eye live stream tonight. It's great to see you here. We're just coming towards the end of the stream while we go over this by-election in Lewisham, mayoral by-election there. Let's quickly drop in, see how Rachel's doing. Any improvement there?
When the Israeli armed forces, who call themselves the...
Oh no, still not looking great. Still not looking great. We've really got to get a crack squad together, find out where this place is. We've got to get John Hurt out of there. It really has. This has gone on for far too long now. It's awful to see. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the live stream. Thanks a lot for being polite in the chat and for being cordial and following the chat rules, of course, as always. No spam or no flooding. Thanks a lot for sharing the content as well. Thanks a lot for liking the stream. It really does help us out with the algorithm. We will, of course, be back with our usual Sunday night slot, and we could be having a members only live stream between now and then as well. That's just another great reason to consider joining the channel. But who's to know what's going to happen between now and the end of the week? As I mentioned, of course, we'll be going into the results of that mayoral by-election in Lewisham, plus whatever other stories transpire between now and then. As we always say, a week's a long time in politics, so anything could happen. Stay tuned and watch this space. Also, if you weren't here last night for our 1000 subscribers special, please do check that out. That's available to view now on the live tab on our channel. It was great to be with people and celebrate passing that landmark as well. and thanks a lot for your comments on all of our recent videos as well. We're trying our best. I'm trying to get back to as many people as I can, but they've been coming in thick and fast, which is of course great. Love to hear your thoughts on the subjects in hand. So until next time, that's just about it for the live stream. You have been wonderful. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Hope to see you on the next live stream as well. Please do hit the notification button so that you'll keep up to date with all of our content, and give us a follow on social media as well. Follow the links in the channel description if you'd like to sign up to Twitter. But that's all for now. Take care.